She was completely naked when she saw him, steam still rising from her flushed skin, water dripping from her hair onto cold marble. Every curve, every inch, every secret her designer gowns had always hidden, exposed under soft corridor lighting, while Dominic Thorne stood frozen at the far end of the hall. Her boss, the billionaire, the man she'd spent 4 years pretending not to want. His dark eyes locked onto hers, and something dangerous shifted in his expression, something hungry and barely restrained that made her breath catch, even through the mortification flooding her veins. He looked at her like he wanted to devour her. And what terrified Gemma most wasn't the humiliation of being caught, it was how badly she wanted him to. What neither of them knew yet was that this moment, this single catastrophic collision of vulnerability and desire, would unravel a secret that had been buried for 4 years, a contract, a sacrifice, and a truth that would force them both to choose between the lives they'd been living and the fire that had been burning between them all along. Welcome back to the Confession Circle. These confessions are for those who seek truth beneath the surface. Subscribe and step into the velvet circle if you're not already inside. Here, we tell only the stories that were meant to stay hidden. Now, let's begin. 30 feet of Italian stone stretched between them, and Gemma's brain short-circuited trying to process how this had happened. The panic attack. That was how. 20 minutes ago, she'd been suffocating in the grand ballroom, 300 guests in designer gowns, champagne flowing, string quartet playing something forgettable, when her father dropped the bomb that shattered her world. Bennett Crane, engaged, arranged, final. Her lungs had stopped working, the corseted gown crushed her ribs like a vice, and the only thought screaming through her oxygen-deprived brain was, "Get out, get out, get out before anyone sees you break." She'd found the private spa wing, restricted, empty. She'd stripped off the gown strangling her and sank into the steam room, letting heat burn away the panic of being traded like livestock for her father's business interests. She'd been alone. She'd been safe. And now Dominic Thorne was seeing absolutely everything. "Don't move," he said. His voice came out rough, nothing like the controlled, measured tone from boardroom meetings. This was raw, hungrier, something that made her skin prickle with awareness even through the mortification. He turned away with deliberate precision, shrugging off his suit jacket, his back to her now, one hand extending the jacket behind him without looking. "Take it." Her legs refused to cooperate. Her brain had evacuated entirely, leaving only the devastating awareness that her boss, the man she'd fantasized about in shameful silence for years, had just seen her completely exposed. Gemma. Her name sounded different in his mouth, almost pained. "Take the jacket." She moved finally, crossed the space on trembling legs. Their fingers brushed when she took the fabric, and she watched his shoulders tense like she'd burned him. The jacket was warm from his body. It smelled of sandalwood and something darker, the scent she'd been pretending not to notice every time he walked past her desk. "Thank you," she whispered, clutching the jacket around her. "I didn't. This wing was supposed to be empty." It was. He still hadn't turned around. "I came back early." Why? Silence stretched between them, thick with something electric. She waited for him to dismiss her, to pretend this never happened, to be the cold, untouchable billionaire she'd convinced herself he was. Instead, he said something that changed everything. You won't believe the first words he said to her.
"I knew you were here." The words hung in the corridor, and Gemma felt her heart stop beating entirely. "What?" "I knew you were in the spa wing." Dominic's voice was carefully controlled, but she heard the strain fracturing beneath. "Security alerted me 20 minutes ago. I came to make sure you were safe." You came looking for me? She pulled his jacket tighter, hyper-aware of her naked body beneath. I didn't know you'd be naked, Gemma. Something dark flickered through his tone. That detail wasn't in the security report. You can turn around now. I'm covered. Mostly. I don't think that's a good idea. Why not? Because... His shoulders shifted, tension radiating in waves. If I turn around right now, I'm going to be thinking about what's under that jacket, and I can't afford to think about that. Heat flooded through her. Not embarrassment this time. Something hotter, more dangerous. The raw admission in his voice made her skin feel too tight for her body. Dominic! You should go back to the gala. His tone shifted to careful control. Your father will notice you're missing. My father? Bitterness sharpened her voice. You mean the man who just announced my engagement to Bennett Crane without asking if I agreed? Dominic went dangerously still. He announced it tonight? During the toast, like I was a merger instead of my daughter. She laughed hollowly. Apparently my feelings about my own future are irrelevant. You don't want to marry Crane. It wasn't a question. I don't want to marry anyone my father picks because it's useful. She moved closer despite herself, drawn by something magnetic. But what I want doesn't factor in. Dominic finally turned around. His eyes met hers, and Gemma felt the air leave her lungs. Heat and restraint, and something darker burned in his gaze. Something that looked like 4 years of hunger finally breaking through. What you want matters, he said quietly, more than you know. To who? She challenged. Not to my father, not to Bennett, not to anyone in that ballroom. To me. 2 words. Simple. Devastating. You've barely spoken to me in 4 years. Her voice cracked. You look through me in meetings. You keep me at perfect professional distance like you're forbidden. His jaw tightened. Because you are. Forbidden by who? By an agreement I made with your father. The words came rough, reluctant. 4 years ago, before you started working for me, before I knew that watching you every day without touching you would be the hardest thing I've ever done. The revelation shattered something inside her. What kind of agreement? Your father needed something from me, desperately. Dominic's eyes never left hers. One of his conditions was that I never pursue you, never touch you, never let you know that I've wanted you since the first moment I saw you. 4 years of silence, 4 years of distance, and it was all a lie. Why are you telling me this now? Because watching him force you to marry someone else, his voice dropped dangerously. I'm not sure I can stay silent anymore. Have you ever wanted someone you were told you could never have?
Returning to the gala felt like walking into her own execution. Gemma had changed into a backup dress, black silk that her mother called too severe, and tried to compose herself into the dutiful Ashford daughter everyone expected. But she could still feel Dominic's jacket against her skin, still smell him in her hair, still hear his voice saying, I've wanted you since the first moment I saw you. There you are. Bennett Crane materialized beside her, champagne in hand, smile sharp enough to cut. Tall, conventionally handsome, and absolutely convinced the world existed to serve him. I've been looking everywhere, darling. His hand landed on her lower back, proprietary, possessive. You disappeared after your father's announcement. People are talking. Let them talk. That's not how this works. Bennett leaned closer, breath hot against her ear. You're going to be my wife. That means you smile, stay visible, and stop making me look foolish. Understand? Gemma stepped away from his touch. I haven't agreed to anything. Your father agreed. That's enough. Not for me. Something ugly flickered across his face, there and gone so fast she almost missed it. A flash of cruelty beneath the polished surface. "You'll adjust," he said softly. "They all do." Before she could respond, her father appeared, steering her toward important guests with practiced ease. "Gemma, darling, the Harringtons want to congratulate you." Smile, nod, accept well wishes for a marriage you never consented to. She'd performed this role her entire life. Perfect daughter, valuable asset, decorative piece positioned wherever Philip Ashford deemed useful. But tonight, something had cracked. Maybe it was the panic attack. Maybe it was standing naked in front of Dominic Thorne and realizing that for a devastating moment, someone had looked at her like she actually mattered. Her eyes found him across the ballroom without permission. Dominic stood near the bar, nursing a drink he wasn't touching, and his attention was entirely on her. Not obvious, never obvious, but she felt the weight of his gaze like fingers trailing down her spine. 4 years of watching? How had she never seen it? "Gemma." Her brother Theo appeared at her elbow, pulling her away with diplomatic apologies. "You look ready to combust." "Dad's selling me to Bennett Crane. That's what's going on." "I know. I tried to stop it." Theo's expression darkened. "He's not listening." "He never does." "There might be another way." Theo lowered his voice. "I've been investigating Crane's finances. Something's wrong. If I can prove he's a liability, Dad won't care. Dominic Thorne might care." Theo studied her face carefully. "He's been watching you all night, and you've been avoiding looking at him. Want to tell me what happened?" "Nothing happened. You're a terrible liar, Gemma." Her phone buzzed. Unknown number. "Meet me on the terrace in 10 minutes. Come alone. D." Her pulse spiked violently. "I need air," she told Theo. "Cover for me." She was already moving toward the terrace doors, drawn by something stronger than sense, something that felt like the first real choice she'd made in years.
The terrace was empty, except for moonlight and Dominic Thorne. He stood at the stone railing overlooking the dark ocean, his back to her, but Gemma knew he'd heard her approach. Men like him heard everything. "You came," he said without turning. "You summoned." She moved to stand beside him, careful to maintain distance even as every nerve ending screamed to close it. "What couldn't wait until morning?" "Bennett Crane." Dominic's voice went flat. "I need you to understand who your father is trying to give you to." "I know who Bennett is. Arrogant, entitled, treats women like accessories." "That's the surface." Dominic finally turned, and the moonlight caught the sharp angles of his face. Beneath it, he's dangerous. 3 years ago, a woman filed assault charges against him. They disappeared within 48 hours, along with the woman. Ice flooded Gemma's veins. Disappeared how? Paid off? Relocated? Threatened into silence? I'm not certain which. His jaw tightened. "But I've been investigating him since your father first mentioned this arrangement. Bennett Crane destroys things he considers his property, and your father is about to make you exactly that." "Then tell your father. Show him the evidence." "I tried, tonight, before the announcement." Dominic's laugh was hollow. "He doesn't care. The Crane family investment saves Ashford Industries from bankruptcy. Your safety is apparently an acceptable trade." The words hit like a blade between her ribs. "He knows Bennett might be dangerous, and he's choosing the company over you." "Yes." Gemma gripped the stone railing, fighting the urge to shatter. "Why do you care? Why does any of this matter to you?" "I already told you why." "You told me you made an agreement with my father. You never explained what it actually says." Dominic was quiet for a long moment, ocean waves crashing somewhere below. 4 years ago, Ashford Industries was 90 days from total collapse. Your father came to me desperate. I gave him the capital infusion that saved everything. Your family home, your mother's medical care, Theo's education, all of it. In exchange for what? Several things. His voice dropped. But the clause that matters most to you is the one that forbids me from ever pursuing your daughter, ever touching you, ever letting you know I existed as anything other than your employer. Why would he demand that? Because he saw how I looked at you. The first time we met, at that charity gala before you even started at Thorne Industries, I couldn't stop staring. Your father noticed, and he made sure I could never act on it. There's one clause in that contract your father hoped she'd never find. What happens if you break it? Gemma whispered. Then everything I gave your family becomes immediately due. The loan converts, Ashford Industries collapses within the month, and your father loses everything. That's insurance. Dominic's jaw flexed. Against me, against whatever he thought I might do to you. And you signed it? I signed it because the alternative was watching your family destroyed, and because I convinced myself I could control this, that wanting you from a distance was survivable. Is it? She breathed. Survivable? No. The word came out rough, broken. Watching another man claim you is killing me, Gemma, and I'm running out of reasons to stay silent. Before she could respond, the terrace door opened behind them. Gemma! Her father's voice cracked through the moment like ice. Inside, now.
The next 48 hours passed in suffocating tension. Gemma played her role, dutiful daughter, reluctant fiancée, while her father watched her every move with suspicious eyes. Dominic had vanished from the estate entirely, and she told herself the hollow ache in her chest was just exhaustion. She was lying. The breaking point came at the engagement celebration her father insisted on throwing. Intimate gathering, 50 guests. Bennett's hand constantly finding reasons to touch her waist, her shoulder, the small of her back. Each contact made her skin crawl. "You're being cold," Bennett murmured, pulling her onto the dance floor. "People are noticing." "Maybe I don't care what people notice." His grip tightened on her waist, not enough to bruise, but enough to warn. "You should care. Your father's company depends on this marriage going smoothly, unless you want to be responsible for destroying your entire family. Let go of me. We need to discuss expectations." Bennett steered her toward the terrace doors, away from the crowd, privately. "I said let go." But they were already outside, the doors closing behind them, and Bennett's pleasant mask finally cracked. "I've been patient." He backed her toward the railing, his body blocking escape. "I've smiled through your coldness, ignored your little disappearing acts, pretended not to notice how you look at Dominic Thorne." Fear spiked through her chest. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Don't lie to me." His hand closed around her wrist, squeezing until she gasped. "I know you met him on this terrace 2 nights ago. I know you were alone with him, and I know that whatever he told you made you think you had options." "You're hurting me." "You don't have options." His face was inches from hers now, eyes cold. "You have a contract. You have a family that needs saving, and you have a fiancé who doesn't share." "Remove your hand." A voice cut through the night, low, deadly, promising violence. Now. Dominic stood in the terrace doorway, and Gemma had never seen anything more terrifying than the controlled rage burning in his expression. Bennett released her wrist, but didn't step back. "This is a private conversation." "Not anymore." Dominic moved with predatory grace, placing himself between Gemma and Bennett with the kind of protective positioning that made his intentions unmistakable.
Touch her again, Dominic said softly. I'll end you, professionally, financially, and, if necessary, physically. That's not a threat. It's a promise I'm hoping you give me an excuse to keep. Bennett's face twisted with fury. You can't interfere. The contract can go to hell. The words hung in the air, and Gemma felt something shift, tectonic plates of power realigning in a single moment. Bennett retreated, shooting Gemma a look that promised later before disappearing inside. And then it was just them. Dominic breathing hard, his control visibly fractured, Gemma trembling with adrenaline and something hotter. Are you hurt? He demanded, taking her wrist gently, examining the red marks Bennett's grip had left. I'm fine. You're not fine. He put his hands on you. And you stopped him. She stepped closer, eliminating the distance between them. You broke your own rules. I'd break every rule I have for you. His voice cracked. Don't you understand that yet? She kissed him. No hesitation, no permission, just 4 years of wanting finally exploding into action. His response was instant, one hand tangling in her hair, the other gripping her hip, pulling her flush against him. He kissed her like he was starving, like she was oxygen and he'd been drowning for years. When they finally broke apart, both gasping, Gemma saw something she'd never expected. Fear in Dominic Thorne's eyes. What did we just do? She whispered. Something I can't take back. His forehead pressed against hers. Something I don't want to take back. But Gemma, you need to understand what this costs. There's more to that contract than I told you. Then tell me everything. Not here, not now. His thumb traced her jaw. Tomorrow, come to my office. I'll show you the document itself. Why not just tell me? Because you need to see it. His voice was heavy with something she couldn't name. You need to understand exactly what I sacrificed before you decide if I'm worth the consequences.
Dominic's private office occupied the top floor of Thorne Tower. All glass walls and cold elegance, the kind of space that announced power without needing to explain itself. Gemma sat across from him, the contract spread between them like a battlefield. She'd been reading for 20 minutes, and with each page her horror deepened. This can't be real. It's real. Dominic's voice was carefully neutral. Every clause, every condition. The contract wasn't just a business agreement. It was a cage. In exchange for saving Ashford Industries, Dominic had agreed to never pursue romantic involvement with Gemma Ashford, maintain strictly professional distance at all times, surrender his personal shares in 3 subsidiary companies, accept a permanent 15% reduction in any future Ashford-related profits, and if any clause was violated, any clause, the full loan amount became immediately due. Ashford Industries would be forcibly absorbed into Thorne Holdings, and Philip Ashford would face criminal fraud charges based on evidence Dominic had quietly gathered and held in reserve. You gave up millions. Gemma's voice shook. You handicapped your own company. She stopped, reading the final clause again. You gave my father leverage to destroy you if you ever touched me. Yes. Why? Because the alternative was watching your family collapse. Dominic leaned forward, elbows on his desk. Your mother needed treatment your father couldn't afford. Theo was about to lose his scholarship, and you... He stopped, something painful crossing his face. You just graduated. You were brilliant and driven and had your whole career ahead of you. I couldn't let your father's failures take that from you. So you saved us. Tears burned behind her eyes. And punished yourself for wanting me. I thought I could handle it. His laugh was hollow. I thought watching you from a distance would be enough, that eventually the wanting would fade. Did it? No. The word came out raw. It got worse. Every day,
seeing you in meetings, watching you solve problems I couldn't crack, hearing you laugh with colleagues who got to touch you casually, ask you to lunch, exist in your orbit without chains around their wrists. He shook his head. 4 years of torture I volunteered for. If you've ever felt trapped by sacrifices others made without asking you first, you belong here with us. Subscribe now. These are the stories that stay with you. You should have told me, Gemma's voice cracked. From the beginning, you should have... Told you what? Your father sold your romantic future to save his company? That I agreed to it because I was arrogant enough to think I could control my feelings? Dominic stood, moving to the window. You deserved better than that burden. I deserved the truth. You deserved a choice. He turned to face her, which is why I'm giving you one now. That contract is still active. If we continue what started on that terrace, your father invokes the penalty clause. Your family loses everything, the company, the house, possibly Theo's career if your father decides to drag everyone down with him. And if we don't continue, then you marry Bennett Crane. Dominic's jaw flexed. You become property of a man who will hurt you eventually, because that's what men like him do, and I spend the rest of my life knowing I could have stopped it, but chose not to. Those aren't choices. Gemma stood, crossing to stand before him. Those are different versions of destruction. Welcome to the world your father built for you. She reached up, cupping his face in her hands, and watched his eyes close like her touch was painful. What if there's a third option? She whispered. There isn't. There's always a third option. Her thumb traced his cheekbone. We just haven't found it yet. Gemma, I'm not giving you up. The words came out fiercer than she intended. I spent 4 years thinking you didn't see me. Now I know you saw everything and sacrificed yourself so I could have a future. I'm not letting that sacrifice be for nothing. Even if it costs your family everything? Even then. She pressed her forehead to his chest. Help me find another way. Fight with me instead of for me. His arms came around her slowly, like he was still afraid she might disappear. If we do this, he said against her hair, we do it together. No more secrets, no more sacrifices without consent. Deal. But even as she held him, Gemma knew the hardest battle was still coming. Her father wouldn't surrender quietly. Bennett wouldn't accept rejection gracefully. And somewhere in that contract, there had to be a weakness she could exploit. She just had to find it before everything collapsed.
The attack came at 7 a.m. Gemma's phone exploded with notifications while she was still in bed. Texts from colleagues, missed calls from Theo, a voicemail from her mother that sounded panicked. She opened her email and felt the blood drain from her face. Someone had sent doctored photographs to every major architecture publication in the city. Images showing Gemma in Dominic's office, positioned to look compromising. Her hand on his chest, his fingers in her hair, angles that transformed a private moment into something sordid and public. The subject line read, Ashford Industries' daughter trades more than designs with Thorne CEO. Her phone rang. Theo. Tell me this isn't real, her brother said without greeting. The photos are manipulated, Gemma's voice shook. We kissed once, that's all. Someone changed the context. Someone named Bennett Crane. Theo's voice was grim. He's been making calls all morning, telling everyone you've been sleeping with Dominic for years, trading sexual favors for career advancement. The accusation hit like a physical blow. That's not... I would never... I know, but Gemma, Dad's already seen the photos. He's on his way to Thorne Tower right now, threatening to invoke the contract penalty. If Dominic doesn't publicly deny any relationship with you, then Dad destroys everything, including Dominic. She closed her eyes. Including all of us. Gemma threw on clothes and drove to Thorne Tower with her heart hammering against her ribs. The lobby security recognized her. She'd worked here for 4 years, but their expressions had changed. Curious, judgmental. The photographs had already spread.
She found Dominic in his office with her father. The scene was worse than she'd imagined. Philip Ashford stood rigid with fury, a printed copy of the contract clutched in his fist. Dominic sat behind his desk, perfectly still, his expression carved from stone. "Explicitly violated Clause 7, her father was saying. "Physical contact of romantic nature. The evidence is everywhere. Every publication in the city has those photographs." "The photographs are doctored," Dominic said calmly. "Doesn't matter. The perception is set. You've destroyed my daughter's reputation, and now I'm invoking—" "You're not invoking anything." Gemma stepped into the office, and both men turned. "Because you don't actually care about my reputation. You care about control." "Gemma, this doesn't concern. This is literally about me." She moved to stand beside Dominic's desk, a deliberate choice of position. "Those photographs were sent by Bennett Crane, the man you're forcing me to marry. He did this because I rejected him, and instead of protecting me, you're using it as an excuse to punish the one person who actually tried to help." Her father's face reddened. "Dominic Thorne took advantage. Dominic Thorne saved our family." Gemma's voice cracked with fury. "He gave up millions. He handicapped his own company. He watched me from a distance for 4 years because you made him promise never to touch me. And now you want to destroy him because Bennett Crane threw a tantrum? The contract is blackmail." She stepped closer to her father, trembling with rage she'd suppressed for years. "You used my future as currency. You sold my romantic life to a man you knew wanted me, just to ensure he'd never have me. That's not protection, that's control." Silence crashed through the office. Her father stared at her like he'd never seen her before, and maybe he hadn't. Maybe he'd only ever seen the daughter he could use, never the woman she'd become. "You have a choice," Gemma said quietly. "You can invoke that penalty clause and destroy everything. Dominic's company, our family business, your own reputation when people learn what you did. Or you can back down, cancel my engagement to Bennett, and let me make my own decisions about my life. And if you choose the first option, then you lose me." Her voice didn't waver. "Forever, completely. I will never speak to you again." The threat hung between them, more devastating than any contract clause. Would you destroy someone's family to save them from a terrible marriage? Tell us in the comments.
Her father chose silence. He left Thorne Tower without invoking the penalty clause, but he didn't back down either. The engagement to Bennett remained technically active. The photographs continued spreading, and Gemma's professional reputation crumbled hour by hour. 3 days later, her father had leveraged the contract to force Dominic into placing her on administrative leave from Thorne Industries. Professional distance, or the penalty clause would trigger. Even Dominic's power had limits when his own board feared the liability. "He's punishing you," Theo said, finding her in their mother's garden, "making your life uncomfortable until you cave." "I'm not caving." "I know." He sat beside her on the stone bench. "But Gemma, Bennett's not going to stop. Those photographs were just the beginning. He's been making calls to every firm that might hire you, blacklisting you from the industry. Then I'll start my own firm." "With what money? Dad's frozen your trust accounts." The reality of her situation pressed down like a physical weight. She'd made her stand, and now she was paying for it, professionally, financially, socially. Everything she'd built over 4 years was crumbling because she dared to want something her father hadn't chosen for her. Her phone buzzed. "Dominic, come to the penthouse. I found something." She went. Dominic's private residence occupied the top 3 floors of a building in the financial district. Gemma had never been inside. 4 years of careful distance meant she'd only seen the lobby. But tonight, he met her at the elevator personally. "What did you find?" "Not here." He led her through the apartment, modern, minimalistic, surprisingly warm, to a home office lined with screens. "I've been investigating Bennett since the photographs leaked, looking for leverage. And he's been falsifying architectural safety reports." Dominic pulled up documents on the central screen.
3 buildings in the past 2 years, cutting corners, bribing inspectors, endangering lives to save money on his family's development projects. Gemma leaned closer, scanning the reports with professional eyes. These are serious violations. If the buildings aren't up to code, they're not. Dominic's voice was grim. 2 of those buildings are occupied, families living in structures that could fail. Horror flooded through her. We have to report this. If we report it, Bennett's family loses their development license. Their company collapses. Your father loses his primary investor for the marriage alliance. So your father invokes the penalty clause the moment I move against Bennett. Dominic turned to face her. He'll claim I'm sabotaging the engagement, violating the contract spirit. Everything I saved for your family becomes due immediately. Gemma stared at the screen, understanding the impossible position. If Dominic exposed Bennett, he saved lives but triggered the penalty clause. Her family's destruction, his company's vulnerability. If he stayed silent, people remained in danger, and Bennett remained free to keep destroying her. There has to be another way, she whispered. There might be. Dominic's hand found hers. But it requires you to do something I can't. What? Expose him yourself. His eyes met hers. The contract restricts what I can do. It says nothing about you. If you're the one who reports the violations, who provides the evidence to the authorities, then you didn't violate anything. Understanding dawned. The penalty clause doesn't apply. Your father will still be furious. You'll still face consequences. But the contract stays intact. Gemma's mind raced through implications. And Bennett goes down for something that has nothing to do with us, nothing to do with romance or jealousy, just professional fraud. It's risky. Everything's risky. She squeezed his hand. But this is something I can do, something that actually helps people, instead of just protecting myself. You'll need documentation, proof that holds up to legal scrutiny. I'm a restoration architect. For the first time in days, Gemma smiled. Reading building reports is literally my job.
Gemma spent 72 hours building a case. She reviewed every document Dominic had gathered, cross-referenced inspection dates with permit applications, identified 3 separate instances where Bennett had personally signed off on falsified safety reports. Then she took everything to the city's building authority. Ms. Ashford, the senior inspector studied her evidence with growing alarm. Are you certain about these allegations? The Crane family has significant influence. I'm certain, Gemma kept her voice steady. Those buildings are occupied by families who have no idea they're living in structures that could collapse. Whatever influence the Cranes have, it doesn't change physics. The investigation moved faster than she expected. Within a week, inspectors had verified her findings. Emergency evacuations began for 2 of the 3 buildings, and Bennett Crane was facing criminal charges for reckless endangerment and fraud. The news broke on a Tuesday morning. Crane Development Heir arrested for building safety fraud, multiple structures condemned. Gemma watched the headlines spread from Dominic's office, where she'd been working since her leave began. He'd given her a temporary position reviewing acquisition properties, completely legitimate, fully documented, nothing her father could weaponize. How do you feel? Dominic asked, standing beside her at the window. Relieved, she leaned into his warmth. Terrified. Powerful. Powerful. I did something that mattered. She turned to face him. Not because my father told me to, not because it was expected, because it was right and I had the skills to make it happen. What skill do you have that everyone underestimates? Tell us in the comments. Her phone buzzed. Her father. My office. Now. We need to discuss the contract situation. He knows, Gemma said, showing Dominic the message. He knows Bennett is arrested and the engagement is effectively over. Dominic's jaw tightened. He's going to try something else. Then let him try. She kissed him once, brief, fierce, promising, before heading to Ashford Industries. Her father waited behind his desk, looking older than she'd ever seen him. The contract sat between them like a weapon, but something in his posture had shifted. The Crane engagement is finished, he said without greeting.
Bennett is facing prison time. His family is toxic. The alliance is worthless. I know. You planned this. His eyes narrowed. You exposed him deliberately. I exposed a criminal who was endangering lives. Gemma sat across from him. The fact that it ended my forced engagement was a bonus. You've backed me into a corner, Gemma. You backed yourself into a corner 4 years ago when you sold my future to control a man you knew wanted me. She held his gaze. I'm just refusing to live in that corner anymore. Her father was quiet for a long moment. The penalty clause, he said finally. I could still invoke it, claim Dominic influenced your decision to expose Bennett. You could, Gemma's voice didn't waver, but you won't. Why not? Because you'd have to explain the contract's existence, the terms, the fact that you bartered your daughter's romantic life for business capital. She leaned forward. How do you think that story plays in the press, Dad? Ashford Industries CEO sold daughter to billionaire for a loan. That's not a headline you survive. Something shifted in her father's expression. Not respect exactly, but recognition. The acknowledgement that her daughter had finally become someone who could match him. What do you want? He asked. Destroy the contract, publicly end the Crane engagement, and stay out of my personal life permanently. And if I refuse? Then I give an interview about how my father tried to force me into marriage with a man he knew was falsifying building reports. She smiled coldly. Your choice. Her father stared at her for a long, terrible moment. Then he picked up the contract and fed it into the shredder.
6 months later, Gemma stood on the terrace of Dominic's coastal estate, the same terrace where he'd first told her about the contract, the same stone railing she'd gripped while her world rearranged itself, and watched the sunset paint the ocean gold. You're thinking too loud. Dominic's arms wrapped around her from behind, pulling her back against his chest. She melted into his warmth automatically now, no longer fighting the instinct to lean into him. I'm thinking about how different everything is. Different good or different terrifying? Both. She turned in his arms, facing him. 6 months ago, I was suffocating, engaged to a man I hated, invisible to the man I wanted, trapped in a contract I didn't even know existed. And now? Now I'm here. She traced the line of his jaw, still marveling that she was allowed to touch him. With you. Free. Dominic caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. Not completely free yet. What do you mean? Instead of answering, he pulled something from his pocket, a small velvet box that made Gemma's heart stop entirely. I wanted to wait, he said quietly. Give you time to breathe, to be sure this wasn't just rebellion against your father or adrenaline from everything we survived. Dominic? But I've waited 4 years already. His voice cracked slightly. I'm done waiting. I'm done watching you from a distance, done pretending I don't want forever with you, done being careful when what I really want is to be certain. He opened the box. The ring inside wasn't ostentatious. Dominic knew her too well for that. Simple, elegant, a single stone that caught the fading sunlight like captured fire. Marry me, he said. Not because of contracts or alliances or family obligations. Marry me because you choose to, because you want to, because after everything, this is still worth fighting for. Gemma felt tears slide down her cheeks, but she was smiling, really smiling, the kind that came from somewhere deep and honest. Yes. The word came out certain, absolute. Dominic's control shattered. He kissed her like he'd been drowning and she was air, his hands framing her face with devastating gentleness, while the ocean crashed somewhere below and the world narrowed to just this, just them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gemma laughed against his mouth. My father is going to have opinions about this. Your father already knows. She pulled back, staring at him. What?
I asked his permission. Dominic's expression was complicated, part amusement, part something softer. Last week, showed up at his office and told him I intended to marry your daughter, with or without his blessing, but that I'd prefer with. And he said yes? He said, Dominic paused, something vulnerable crossing his face. He said I'd already proven I was willing to sacrifice everything for you, that maybe he'd been wrong about needing to protect you from me, that if anyone deserved you, it was someone who waited 4 years without complaint just to earn the right to try. The words hit Gemma like a wave. Her father admitting he was wrong, her father giving genuine blessing instead of reluctant permission. He's changed, she whispered. Watching you take control of your own life changed him. Dominic pulled her close again. Watching you become someone who didn't need his protection, his approval, his permission, it made him realize he'd been holding on too tight to something that was never his to hold. That's almost poetic. I've had time to think about it. Gemma rested her head against his chest, listening to his heartbeat, feeling the weight of the ring now on her finger. I walked into a corridor naked 6 months ago, she said quietly, and my whole life changed. Best accident of my life. Dominic's voice was rough with emotion. Watching you stand there, completely exposed, completely vulnerable, and realizing I couldn't stay silent anymore, couldn't keep pretending I didn't want you more than I'd ever wanted anything. Even when it cost you? Especially then. His arms tightened around her. Some things are worth the cost, Gemma. You taught me that. She looked up at him, this man who had waited, who had sacrificed, who had fought for her when she didn't even know she needed fighting for. I love you, she said, not because you saved me, because you let me save myself, and then you stayed. I'm never leaving, he promised. Not ever again. The sun finished setting, painting them both in fading gold, and Gemma realized that this was what freedom actually felt like. Not the absence of constraints, but the presence of choice. The ability to stand beside someone and know you picked them, freely, completely, without coercion or contract. Just love, earned and chosen, and finally, beautifully, hers. Can you truly build a future on the foundation of secrets? Or does real love require tearing everything down first? She didn't have all the answers yet, but standing there in Dominic's arms, wearing his ring, watching the stars emerge over the ocean, she knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, they'd face it together. And that was enough. That was everything. Until the next confession, stay close, Velvet Circle.